Hi.
Hey, Wawa, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Let me just make this even more boring for our viewers at home by getting my face close to the thing so I can turn up the volume a little bit.
Okay.
I see we got some folks who've joined us. I think more of these, Wawa, are probably your folks than mine. You've got a much bigger platform on the gram than I have or than EDF Action has. So why don't you get us started?
Yeah, well, I am just so excited for this conversation. I want to apologize in advance. I just adopted two cats and they are in love with my laptop. So they might try to rub up and make an appearance. So if they do, say hi to Queens and George. But I'm so excited for this conversation. So hi everyone. Wawa Gatheru. I am a Kenyan American climate advocate and storyteller, a Black girl environmentalist. And I'm going to be having this really fantastic conversation where we're going to be talking all things climate action, different ways to get involved, and just really providing an overview of what the landscape looks like right now. So I'm sure you can agree, if there's one thing that we know for certain, it's that climate action cannot wait. So tonight I'm really excited to activate. Um, I'm really thrilled to be here speaking with you, David. So I'd love for you to introduce yourself to my followers and anyone else that is watching so that they also can get kind of contextualize what's going on here.
Sure. Well, Wawa, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and thanks to everyone who's spending a little bit of their Tuesday evening with us. Everybody knows that Tuesday is by far the lamest night of the week, so it's not like you're giving up all that much to be here with us, but still, any time away from family, new cats, loved ones, loved creatures, is time that I know is precious to all of you, especially for folks who are working hard or studying hard all day. So we're grateful that you all joined us. I'm David Kieve. It feels like I started yesterday. I've been at EDF Action as their new president for about 6 months now. So I'm still figuring out where all the light switches are and the bathrooms, and I'm hiding from my dog who's at home. I'm in the office actually, so he doesn't bark. But I'm delighted to be here. Before I joined EDF Action, I was in the Biden White House and part of the Biden-Harris transition. And before that, I was part of the Biden-Harris campaign, where I led all of our engagement on climate, on everything from dealing with the big green groups like EDF and EDF Action to working on environmental justice, which is a real passion of mine. So, Wawa, I'm delighted to be with you tonight, and let's roll. I mean, as you put it, climate can't wait. Let's activate. Let's talk to folks. Let's talk to each other about what needs to happen and about what the landscape looks like out there.
Amazing. Yeah, so let's jump into it. So a lot of people have been asking me on my platform. A lot of people have been Googling online to learn more about this recent landmark case in the Supreme Court. And I'd love for you to a little bit about what happened and what it means for the future of climate action, as well as give us a brief overview of the landscape for climate action in Congress.
Cool. Yeah, the Supreme Court had a recent decision. I'm sure you were following it, and a lot of the folks who are watching were following it. The case at hand was West Virginia versus EPA. And what was sort of a bummer to a lot of us was that the Supreme Court decided in the first place to hear the case at all. One of the things that's generally required before you decide to hear a Supreme Court case, if you're the justices on the court, is that the plaintiff, the folks who are bringing the case, need to have what they call standing. So if you're West Virginia, who was the plaintiff in this case, you need to demonstrate that there's potential harm or real harm that's been done to you. We felt pretty clearly that there was no standing because there was no potential harm. West Virginia was suing over the Obama-era Clean Power Plan. And the Obama-era Clean Power Plan was set aside by the Trump administration. And President Biden and his team said pretty clearly that they had no immediate plans to reinstate the Obama-era Clean Power Plan. So to our mind, that meant it was pretty open and shut. The case should have probably been dismissed because West Virginia didn't have any standing in the case. So that the court was interested in hearing the case at all was a little scary for all of us who care deeply about climate. And it was scary for me personally. It was scary for EDF, which was pleased to be a participant in the lawsuit. We felt that we feared that they were interested in taking the case because they were interested in constraining regulatory authority of the Environmental Protection Agency. And that's exactly what they wound up doing. This case was also the very first time that we've seen a relatively novel legal doctrine. Gosh, what's it called? You probably know it well. The major questions doctrine cited in a majority opinion of the Supreme Court. What the major questions doctrine says is effectively, well, if there were major questions and it might have a major impact on the economy, it's not enough what the text was in the law when the law was written. It should go back to Congress for Congress to decide what the lawmakers meant. There's this long, long history of deference to regulators to be the experts and to figure out what might work best. The Supreme Court is effectively setting that aside and saying, if there's any question about it, you have to go back to Congress to ask. And in her dissenting opinion, Justice Kagan, who disagreed with the result, pointed to that pretty clearly. And she said, well, I was joking in a prior speech that we are all textualists now, that we all care deeply what the text of the Constitution or the text of the laws that we're reviewing means. I think she described the major questions doctrine as this sort of get out of jail free card for textualism. And the disappointing thing to me and to a lot of us is that it feels like a doctrine that has been sort of espoused to only go one way. It doesn't go in the way of public health or public safety. It's like a swinging door that only swings in one direction because it only swings to constrain regulators from regulating appropriately. That having been said, I've probably talked too much about this court case already because there are other people within EDF that are far, far more expert in it than I am. It was not the resounding loss that we all feared. It wasn't the worst case scenario. And there is much, much more that EPA and others can do to protect public health and to regulate pollution. And we are very excited to see them do that.
For sure, for sure. And no, you did not speak. I think it's important for people to hear this, right? Because there were a lot of different headlines that were happening, specifically online on TikTok, Instagram, that basically said the EPA now cannot regulate at all on greenhouse gas emissions. It's actually not quite that scenario. And as you said, it could have been worse, but it's still not great. So I think it's really important that we'll continue to learn more about the dynamics of the case and what it means. And just, continue to learn from such knowledgeable people like you.
Cool. Well, thanks. What do you want to talk about next?
Yeah, so I think you have a question.
Cool. You've done so much, and you talked a little bit about Black Girl Environmentalist, and you've been so sort of honored and decorated in your relatively young life. You've been the student body president of the flagship landmark, the flagship of a state education system at the University of Connecticut, a state that I know well. What are you proudest of in terms of your actions to bring people together and to shine a bright light and to use your voice and accumulate a bigger platform to talk about environment and justice in this world?
Yeah, so I was vice president of the student body in undergrad, but it was a fantastic opportunity. But that's a fantastic question. So what am I most proud about in regards to climate action? I would say that I am very proud of all the relationships that I've been able to make and all the incredible people that I've gotten to organize with. I've learned so much about what climate organizing can look like and about what I really want to build in the past several years through my relationships with folks. I think you can probably speak to this, right? Working in climate can be really heartbreaking. The information that we are engaging with on the day to day can be very heavy. And I think oftentimes we have to remind ourselves that the work that we're doing, we are doing this to ensure that live a life beyond survival. So what does that look like? And that's where the fun comes. We get to really engage in world building with our friends, really engage in joy in the now to really begin to live out the dynamics that we're working towards. So being able to be in relationship with folks that constantly remind that has been really, really fulfilling. It has been me in regards to my direction and has been changing and has been traversing different spaces. So yeah, I'd say that's the thing I'm most proud of, been really flipping what climate work could be and understanding that engaging in joy and engaging in building with my friends and comrades is a really powerful thing to be involved with.
Awesome. It's so great. Thank you for sharing that perspective with us, and super excited to be here with you this evening. And you're welcome for giving you a promotion. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were only the vice president of the University of Connecticut student body, not the president. Must have been an impressive president sitting in front of you, or you were perhaps driving a lot of enthusiasm from the bottom half of the ticket.
Yeah, for sure. So to also take this time to ask you a question, if that's all right. So, David, a lot of the people that are tuning in are likely tuning in because they want action, they want to figure out what they can do. They log off to get engaged in their community, get engaged in climate action in really tangible ways. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. What can we do right now to protect the climate, and what can particularly Gen Z and millennials do to ensure that we have an inhabitable future for ourselves and all the generations to come?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And this is going to sound salesy, but forgive me. I mean, but it really is important. And we've already talked a little bit about the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court effectively threw a bunch of climate action back in Congress's lap. And for all of us, I think there's a strong desire to see Congress do more. One of the things that I wrestle with sometimes is I think that as great as this country is, the country is probably greater than our government is right now. And our government has let the American people down time and time again by not stepping up and meeting the moment. We can get there on climate, but we need to have leaders, elected officials who are committed to doing the right thing and who will stand up and have the courage to say, you know what, if it's not going to help us reverse course on climate change, I'm not going to do it. And if we can do that, and we can use our voices in order to say very, very clearly, if you're not going to protect our planet, I'm not going to even consider voting for you. That'll change the game, and it'll change the dynamic. So one way to do it is through my organization, EDF Action. Folks can go to edfaction, that's all one word, .org/vote, just VOTE. There's a really simple pledge that's up there. It just says, I'm only going to support candidates who are good for the climate. That's it. It's something that I deeply believe. It'll take you about 20 seconds to do. I know, because it's a brand new pledge, and I was, I think, the 21st or 22nd signer of it earlier today. So all the folks watching at home or in the library or wherever they are going to take 10, 15 seconds to do it. We'll get a lot more people on board with that with that pledge. But that's how movements get started. You know this, having started organizations yourself. You don't start with millions of people already out in the street. You start by getting angry or getting motivated, and by calling the people who are closest to you, your friends, neighbors, families, loved ones, and saying, hey, I'm really frustrated with this. Here's what I want to do about it. Will you come with me? So this is us saying, hey guys, will you join us in raising your voice to say, I'm only going to vote for candidates who are going to do the right thing for our planet. If you don't want to visit the website, there's another way to do it too. You can text your way in. You could text to the number 528 888-886. Just text climate vote, all one word. And that'll take you through the sign up sheet and get you into the pledge as well. So those are two quick things you can do. Once you have decided that you're only going to vote for climate champions, you got to show up. You got to vote in every single election. Voting rights are another thing that unfortunately seem to be under attack. And some of the landmark and basic civil rights that our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents worked hard and fought hard for, and some bled and some died to achieve, now seem to be under attack. The same Supreme Court is likely to hear, has already signaled that they intend to hear a case that's likely to undo in key ways the Voting Rights Act. There was this thought that we were close to getting landmark voting rights legislation through Congress. That fell short and stalled, just as climate legislation has fallen short and stalled. There are people who are out there who are working hard on purpose to make it harder for people to vote. The antidote for that is us determining that we're going to uphold and maintain what I believe is a sacred right that some of our forefathers fought and died to make sure that everybody in this country has, and show up in every single election. I live here in Washington, D.C. It's relatively easy to vote in Washington, D.C. They mail a ballot to every single person so that you can vote with no excuse by absentee ballot. I don't like to do that. I like to bring my kids with me to the polls so that they can see our democracy up close, and so that they can stand in line with my neighbors and with other members of our community so that they can see our democracy at work. But if it's easier for you to vote early in-person absentee, if it's easier for you to vote by mail and you're eligible to do that, you should do that. You should vote however you can, legally and appropriately, to participate in our democracy. And you should encourage others to as well. As you know, having raised your voice so powerfully, all of us are just but one person out there. But when we start talking to other people and we start talking about our core convictions and what we really believe, our voice is amplified and multiplied out there. So please, folks, don't think that your voice doesn't matter, because your voice matters more than it ever has. And it's vitally, vitally important that we stand up and we tell the cynics and the folks who think that we're not going to do anything, and maybe we're going to get down and we're not going to want to get out of bed, we're going to keep our covers up over our eyes, and we're going to pretend the world just going to go away, that we're going to get motivated and we're going to go out there and we're going to do more, not less.
Yeah, 100%. You had talked about, voting as being this right that we have, and I couldn't more. As a Black woman, it took 2 constitutional amendments for me to even be able to vote. And as a daughter of immigrants to parents that only recently got their citizenship, my mom just recently got her citizenship, I know what a privilege it is to vote, and how oftentimes our vote is helping to support, that 17-year-old that isn't able to vote, but really knows what they would vote for, and unfortunately doesn't have that right at the time. So I think it's so important to recognize that this is a right that we have, and we should be exercising it and making our voices heard. I also want to perhaps provide the opportunity for us to address kind of what you're talking about. There are cynics out there, and to a degree, I can understand where a lot of this frustration and anger that folks have. Every single election here, politicians tell us, this is the most important election of our lives, you need to vote. And then issues like climate, we see climate legislation not necessarily happening at the scale that I think a lot of us agree should be happening. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we make sure that our elected officials deliver results, and if not, how do we hold officials accountable on climate action to those people that might be watching this and saying, well, okay, I understand that voting is important, but what happens when the people I am voting in are not actually following through on the very campaign deliverables that they said that they'd work towards?
That's an excellent question. I want to answer it because I believe in answering a direct question directly. But I want to go back to your mother's naturalization ceremony too. Were you able to be with her for it?
I wasn't. Oh, yeah, definitely an experience I wish I could have been in, but yeah, I heard it went really well.
That's so great, and it speaks so much to the core values that this country was founded upon. That people want to be a part of this country, and they want to come from all over the world, and they take the time and effort, and they say, "I want to be an American." That means something, and it especially means something in light of what we've been through these past several years with the Trump presidency and all that it has entailed. I'm riveted. We are a climate-focused organization, but I have to admit I'm riveted by the January 6th committee's work and their hearings. And it's a reminder that this was not some ancient chapter in America's history. This was less than 2 years ago. So making sure that we continue to elect leaders who want to do the right thing, even if sometimes it's hard, and even if progress isn't moving as quickly as we'd like it to, is vitally, vitally important to the future of this nation. So I'm so glad that your mother has decided that she wanted to be an American citizen. I've seen naturalization ceremonies that they move me to tears, that people want to be Americans and take the time and energy and effort to want to go through that process so that they can participate in our democracy. And I'm so proud to be with you today as you know, sitting here in conversation with a proud child of immigrants. So thank you for that. In terms of like what we can do, I'm not a politician, but I work for a political organization, and I am a deeply and unapologetically political person. I hear you, Wawa, that young people and everyone gets sick of hearing every single election, this is the most important election of my lifetime. You have to go and do this thing. I'm not going to tell anybody out there that this is the most important election of their lifetime. President Trump, or just Donald Trump, real estate guy from 2016, is not on the ballot this election. He may be again in a couple of years. This is a midterm election, and every non-presidential year, turnout gets lower. You know, during the Obama years, I was so sick of reading the pundits talking about, well, so-and-so lost because they failed to turn out the Obama coalition. Not everybody shows up that shows up in a presidential election. But you know what that does to our power and our voice? It elevates it if we do decide that we're going to show up. So if you decide that you are motivated by a desire to see meaningful action taken on climate, and if you decide to take our pledge at edfaction.org/vote and say that you're only going to vote, but you're always going to vote for candidates who protect our climate, that matters even more in a non-presidential year than it does in a presidential year. And I also hear you on everybody, young people especially, feeling frustrated that Congress hasn't acted and that the people who we've elected to do a job haven't finished that job. I'm not going to say that that frustration is misplaced. It's not. But I get up and I redouble my efforts every single day because I understand that we are facing a shrinking window of time. Science tells us that we've only got until 2030 to take meaningful action to stop global warming and shrink it to less than 2 degrees Celsius. That felt like a short window of time when I was working for now President Biden and Vice President Harris on the campaign in 2020. We're now 2 years down the road. That window is even shorter. We've lost 20% of the time that we had. And we made a little bit of progress with the infrastructure law and some other things and some of the regulatory framework and approach they've taken and some of the state actions, but we've not made enough progress. So I'm going to keep at it. I'm going to keep working to elect pro-climate candidates so that we can get real climate progress over the finish line. I meant to talk about it at the top. Is it okay if I talk a little bit about sort of like the way that we see and I see the state of legislation right now?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
Cool. Well, like this is a frustrating time for a lot of us. I imagine you probably feel it. I definitely feel it every single day because feels like we're perhaps further away than we've been for a while in getting climate legislation over the finish line. Back in the fall, the House passed the president's Build Back Better plan. It included $550 billion worth of climate investments. That kind of dragged out, and they started anew after the start of this year because one senator in particular decided that he couldn't get behind the president's Build Back Better plan that had passed the House. So we wound up needing 50 votes and only having 49. We still need 50 votes, and we still only have 49. It was announced a couple of Thursdays ago, so less than 2 weeks ago. Again, tonight's Tuesday, yawn. Sorry, I hate Tuesdays. It was announced a couple of Thursday evenings ago that Senator Manchin was walking away from the negotiations on climate, and that he only wanted to pass a prescription drug deal via reconciliation. That was tremendously disappointing to me and to so many of us. But as the news accounts of that negotiation are coming into sharper focus, it was clear how close to a deal we were. The deal that was on the table was $375 billion worth of clean energy tax credits that would have gotten us 40% of the way towards that 50% emission reduction by 2030, according to the best estimates out there. So it wouldn't have done all of the job, but it would have gotten us a lot closer, and we would have only needed to figure out, okay, how do we make up the other 10% to get there, which we probably could have done with some combination of state and local actions, corporate commitments on climate, and a few other things, including the president unlocking his the toolkit of regulatory tools at his authority to help us get there. I still believe that we need that 40% as a huge, huge thing. But those tax credits that we're talking about are hugely popular. They're popular with key segments of our economy in terms of the manufacturers and companies that run these things. Everybody talks. I talk a lot about electric vehicles because they're easier to sort of understand. We've seen huge commitments from General Motors, from Ford. Tesla obviously didn't need to make a big commitment to go all electric because they've always been all electric. There are incredible commitments from companies that have made a lot of money over a long period of time selling cars that are powered by internal combustion engines to move away from that model and move towards cars that are only powered by clean electricity. Those companies and the union that represents their workers for the unionized ones are fully supportive of the tax credits that are still out there and still on the table that we still need to get done. We've talked a little bit about West Virginia versus EPA, which concerned how to regulate the power sector of our economy. Just about every leading power company is supportive of the clean energy tax credits that are inside of this plan because they know they're going to speed the way that we move to a faster transition to clean energy. The American people are hugely supportive of clean energy. They now understand that this old false construct of you could either do the right thing for the economy or the right thing for the planet is out the window. And that the only open question now is, are we in a place, the jobs of the future are clearly in clean energy. Are they going to be here in the United States paying a good family supporting wage with an opportunity to join a union? Or are they going to be overseas, somewhere else, perhaps China, perhaps wherever? We'd like them to be here. They're coming though. The economy is transitioning to clean energy. The question is whether or not those jobs come here as well, and these tax credits can help to speed it. And then finally, Senator Manchin mentioned this is a big part of the reason why he wasn't ready to move forward with this package when he walked away a couple of Thursdays ago. He expressed a worry about inflation. There's no question that cost to families is a major concern. It's a concern to me. It's costing me more to send my kids to summer camp. It's costing me more to travel with them to go see family. It's costing me more to put sandwiches in their lunch buckets when their lunch boxes when they go off to camp in the morning. Costs are a real concern for just about every family in this country. But here's the thing about this series of tax credits. This isn't new stimulus. This isn't giant new spending, injecting more money into our economy. These are tax credits that are going to bring down costs for families. And they're going to bring down bills and what it costs to power your home and your vehicle if you choose to travel in one as opposed to taking public transportation, and to keep the lights on in your office. The tax credits for electricity, so power only, one study indicated they would likely save the average American family $500 a year by 2030. That's real money. Another study indicated that speeding the transition to electric vehicles will save people on average $80 a month powering their car up with a plug versus filling up at a gas pump. That study was done long before gas shot up to $4 a gallon. So if it was $80 a month several months ago, it's probably closer to $120 a month today. These are real costs and real cost savings for American families. So whether or not what the next inflation report says is immaterial to this set of policy proposals, because if inflation remains high, this will be a good plan because it will help to bring inflation down and save American families money. If inflation shows that it has cooled a little bit, this will still be a good plan that will save American families money. Regardless of what the next set of inflation numbers say, this is a set of policy proposals that are going to save American families lots and lots of money.
Thank you so much. While you've been talking and while you've been really great conversation, I am absolutely loving the dialogue that is taking place in the comments. I think someone had said earlier that really, I'm trying to find exactly what the person said. They said, yes, climate delay is a form of climate denial. We cannot afford more delay. And I couldn't agree with you more. And David, all these different ways for people to get involved in climate action, provide response to topics that I'm sure people have been seeing or understanding only through buzzwords online. And I think you've provided a really, really great landscape for people to move forward after live and do some more research and figure out different ways to get involved. So I'd love to, with our remaining time, I know 5 minutes over here, but after our intended end date, but I'd love to get in some of the questions that folks have been filling in. Liz, I love how engaged you've been in this conversation. I love to get to some of your questions. So Lizzie asked first, what kind of executive action can we still need congressional action?
Yes and yes. I mean, it's really all of the above, because we know that our window for taking meaningful action is shrinking right now, and that we don't have any time to waste. So we need the Biden-Harris administration to do everything that they can. A lot of that power sits at the Environmental Protection Agency to regulate under the Clean Air Act pollution in our air and reduce climate pollution in the air, and under the Clean Water Act to make sure that we have clean water. There are a menu of different options that there are a ton of complicated rulemaking processes that EPA is leading on and will announce rules on in the coming months and year and a half, regulating emissions for for trucks, for cars, for power plants. Even though West Virginia versus EPA curtailed some of that authority, they didn't curtail all of it. Regulating emissions on methane. All of those are going to be processes that take a relatively long time. This rulemaking process is intentionally slow, it's intentionally sort of cautious, and it intentionally includes a lot of opportunity for public comment. So for people who care about this regulatory process and care that folks get it right, we at EDF Action are going to offer you lots of opportunities to weigh in on the front end and call on them to do the right thing around specific rules. But then they don't just announce the rule and it's final and it's done. There's a rulemaking process that needs to be followed. So typically an agency will announce a proposed rule and then there'll be an open comment period. And that's another opportunity for people to participate in our democracy and raise their voice and say, you know what? This is a rule that didn't go far enough, or this is a rule that's really good and it will make key protections for the American people, including people who look like the folks who I grew up with in my underserved neighborhood, make our lives better. So there's lots and lots of opportunity for action. One example that's already happened was the vehicle emission standards for light duty vehicles that EPA announced last year. The president made that announcement on the South Lawn of the White House, joined by the leader of the United Auto Workers, the main union representing workers in the auto industry, and by the heads of the big three automakers, Ford, GM, and what used to be Chrysler, now they're called Stellantis, all standing there saying this is a good plan. And if we enact the rest of the president's agenda, we can get to over 50% electric vehicle sales by the year 2030. And we think we can get there with the president's agenda being passed. Fred Krupp, the president of EDF Action is the advocacy partner of a much larger organization called the Environmental Defense Fund, was there and was happy to be there. He stood shoulder to shoulder with union leaders, industry leaders, and other environmental leaders in applauding this decision. But a funny thing happened during the regulatory process. There were folks who thought that regulatory action on light duty vehicle emissions didn't go far enough. By the time the final rule was announced, some 60, 70 days later, it didn't get watered down, it got stronger. So we've seen this process work. We've seen standards go from really very good to even better. And there's no reason why that can't happen down the road and in the future. But to the other part of Lizzie's question, do we still need congressional action? God, yes. I want that giant 40% of the way towards our 50% emission reduction by 2030 goal. And the easiest way to break that chunk off is not by heightening regulatory authority. It's by changing the set of incentives that are out there so that people move to clean energy power, whether it's in their homes, their vehicles, their offices, where have you, faster and sooner than they otherwise would on their own.
Right. I also see another question, the answer in regards to question. Yes, thank you so much. Does reaching out to congressional reps even matter anymore? I hate to be a downer. Some politicians don't care about their constituents. This is a question. This is not me saying this. Well, I think that reaching out to your congressional reps does matter. I actually was an intern in Senator Murphy's office back in the day, and I quite literally saw how important it was for folks to call in and let their reps know exactly what issues matter to them. And I know that there was a huge disparity in the generational response that we were seeing. A lot of the folks that were calling in were over the age of 65. And I was like, this is very interesting. I know every single day I'm talking with my friends and comrades and acquaintances, and we all really care about issues like climate justice and climate action. Yet from the perspective of being an intern in this office, there was relatively no outreach from Gen Zers. I think actually I can count, I got 3 calls from people under the age of 20, which I thought was really concerning. So yes, please do reach out to your representatives, people that are in office. That is quite literally their job, and let them know what matter the most to you. What we see, a lot of their legislative agenda are curated to meet issue their constituents. And if your voice isn't being heard, especially via contacting them, then we're much less likely to see the type of legislative advancements in our own districts in the ways that we really deserve to see. So please don't lose hope. But also I want to let y'all know that voting is very important, as well as getting your community, right? Your community is the folks that you are growing alongside. Get to know your neighbors, get people that you see in the grocery store, introduce yourselves. So much of climate resiliency is being able to lean on the folks around you, especially in the face of disaster. And right now, with all the issues that we're seeing in our world, we're really lacking the kind of connectivity to each other, the planet that we really need and really deserve to be able to build the world that we all want and need. So please don't let that also fall in the cracks as well. Also, as we talked about before, the midterms are coming up, and there are folks are elected in office that do not believe in climate, that are working adamantly to say no to climate legislation. Or check out the people that are representing you and see what issues they are on, what their priorities are, and especially if climate is even on their table of issues that they see as true and valid. Make sure that the people that are there are actually doing the things that they need to do. So that's all I have to say in that regard. Any other questions that we want to have David answer right before we end for minutes in conversation after we were meant to end? Anyone else? Any questions?
Wawa, this is kind of your show. Any closing thoughts from you before I make one last plug that people sign our petition?
Yes, of course, y'all. Make sure to sign the petition. Make sure to register to vote if you're not ready. Make sure to get in your community, join a climate and or environmental organization in your community, or bring climate and environmental concerns to the organizing work that you're already doing. And make sure that you understand that you have a unique role to play in the climate movement, in climate. We don't need everyone to necessarily march on the streets and do climate that way. You have a unique role to play with the unique talents and skills that you have, and make sure that you utilize them and plug them in, because we need 1 billion climate activists and different people that are engaged in doing work, and we really need everyone. So we love to welcome you to this movement, and I hope you all stay tuned to EDF Action, EDF in general, and that you follow along to all the cool climate organizing work and policy that's happening behind the scenes every single day, because people are working on this every single day, day in, day out, and this is a movement of our lives. So thank you so much, David, for taking time. I know Tuesdays aren't your favorite day of the week, but I really enjoyed getting to chat and to learn so much from you.
This is so much more fun than anything I've done on a Tuesday that didn't have an election in it for a very long time, Wawa. So thanks for having me. Just really quickly, so that folks hear from me one last time, the 2 ways to sign up and to sign our pledge that say, you know what, I'm not going to vote for you if you're not going to do the right thing for climate and for the planet, are to go to edfaction.org/vote, or to text climate vote to 52886. So I hope you guys will take like 20 more seconds of your Tuesday night. I know you don't have anything else going on. Either text climate vote to 52886 or go to edfaction.org/vote, sign our really quick petition, and just tell elected officials you're not going to vote for them anymore unless they're going to do the right thing for our planet. So, well, thanks for all that you do. Thanks for giving me a little space to talk to some of your many, many fans, of whom I count myself proudly as one. And I hope we get to do this again sometime. Really appreciate all your advocacy and optimism, and that you know how serious the problems are, but you know that we'll go further if we address them honestly and earnestly and with a smile on our face.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, David. Thank you, everyone that has engaged, and thank you for the really engaging conversation that's been happening. Yes, y'all, get involved with climate, continue the good fight, and look forward to getting to work alongside you and just be in this movement together. So have a great Tuesday night, everyone.
Take care, guys.
Bye.